Hello everyone. My name is Bassem Rehan, and I'm the current chapter president of the Beta Mu chapter at Eta Kappa Nu of Eta Kappa Nu at Georgia Tech. So today we're hosting an alumni panel of former HKN members and who can provide valuable advice about anything ranging from courses to career that would benefit any ECE or CS student that's currently at Georgia Tech. So I hope you take advantage of the time that our alumni are here for, and if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm also going to open if you want to unmute and ask those questions when we get there. You can do that as well. It's my pleasure to introduce our Georgia Tech and HKN alumni who are our panelists today. Panelists, after your introduction, if you could please provide some more details if you want to about your background behind your Georgia Tech career, what you were involved in, and how you have gotten to your career now. I feel that's a good way to get started. So first, I'll start with Frank. Frank Zhou studied electrical engineering along with a minor in computer science while at Georgia Tech. He graduated from Tech in 2018 and has been actively involved with HKN for most of his time at Georgia Tech. Since graduating, he has been working at MathWorks, initially in their EDG program, but since transferred to the Industry Model Testing Group within the company. On the side, he has co-founded a travel startup company with a few of his high school friends. So Frank, if you have anything you want to add?
That's pretty good. I've been with HKN since first year, second semester. I was one of those sophomore bad credits people, if that's still a meme. Um, and yeah, I'll leave it to the other panelists.
All right, cool. Next person I'll introduce is Ryan Bales. So Dr. Ryan Bales is a senior research engineer at the Georgia Tech Research Institute, where he has worked since 2008 on FPGA-based electronic warfare systems. He received his bachelor's in computer engineering and his MS in electrical engineering in 2006, both from the University of Missouri-Rolla. He received his PhD in ECE from Georgia Tech in 2011. He is an IEEE senior member and is a licensed professional engineer since 2015. Dr. Bales serves as chair of the Atlanta IEEE AESS/GRSS chapter, serves on the IEEE HKN Board of Governors, and is a member of the Association of Old Crows. So, Dr. Bales, if you want to, anything else?
That pretty well sums it up. I was inducted into Eta Kappa Nu back in about 2002 in the Gamma Theta chapter at the University of Missouri-Rolla, and I was really involved there as a student. I had a few different officer positions, vice president, president, and marketing chair, and some things like those. And it was one of the most rewarding organizations I got to be a part of as a student there, just because we had so many service-focused activities and that sort of thing. We really got to do a lot for the campus and the community, so that was a lot of fun. It was a lot more involved and rewarding than some of the other organizations on campus. So that was one of the things I took away from that. And then I'm still involved in IEEE and HKN now, like you mentioned. So there are definitely opportunities for staying involved in those things after you graduate. But yeah, that's all.
Thank you. And our last panelist is Kennedy Taylor. Kennedy Taylor served as the president of HKN in 2017 and was heavily involved with HKN throughout her time at Georgia Tech. She graduated with a BS in December 2017 and went on to work at Accenture. She has been working as an electrical engineer, designing schematics and PCBs of several types of devices. She has also been involved with developing firmware and sales pitches for these products. Kennedy, if you have anything to add.
Not really. Yeah, I was heavily involved with HKN. I don't remember when I got inducted, maybe 2014, 2015. I was involved in all different types of things on campus. I really enjoyed my time at HKN. It, led to me having relationships with a lot of different people in WE and CompE, not just in my classes, like Frank. So yeah, I really enjoyed my time at HKN, and that's it.
Thank you very much, all three. So we'll start with just a general question. If any other students attending right now have any questions, feel free to put it in the Blue Jeans chat, but we'll just start with a general question to start off the panel. And it will be, how did your experience at Georgia Tech help you find your first position after graduation? So if anyone, any three of you want to answer that question.
Sure, I can.
Or Kennedy.
Yeah, so when I was at Georgia Tech, I didn't quite know exactly what I wanted to do within EE. I got accepted to the BSMS, so I just knew I liked all things EE. I kind of focused in DSP. I kind of dipped out of the BSMS and went to Accenture to kind of feel it out. Ended up doing PCB design and ended up loving it. So just know, whatever you're doing in school, your horizons are big. You can still decide once you're in your career. You don't have to decide right now. There's always opportunity to change.
Anchor Ryan?
Yeah, I can go. I ended up where I'm at now really by a long series of coincidences. I worked as a board operator at the public radio station in Rolla, in Missouri, where I did my undergrad. And the power went out one night, and I had to reset a bunch of the equipment, so I had to stay longer than normal. And I came out of the building about 1 in the morning, and one of the professors there at Rolla, who ended up becoming my master's advisor, Steve Watkins, he was coming out of the EE building at the same time, and we talked a little bit, and he said it would be good if I worked on a particular project. And one thing led to another. I started doing some work related to that project on FPGAs. When I started at Tech as a PhD student, one of my TA assignments was as a TA for Suda Yalamanchili on the FPGA VHDL class, and it just turned out that one of his TAs 10 years earlier worked at GTRI doing the same kind of work, and he pinged Suda every once in a while to see if he had any students who could do FPGA related work, and he happened to need somebody then who could do video work too, which was what my PhD was on. So yeah, at one point in my academic career, I'd actually ruled out doing things on FPGAs just because my lab experience as an undergrad was horrible. I'd ruled out radar because I thought everything in radar had basically been done. I knew the history channel version of radar, that you send a pulse out and it bounces back and you measure the round trip time. I didn't really know a lot about all the other work that's gone on in radar since then. And so now I'm at GTRI doing FPGA designs for radar and radar related applications. Mostly because I ended up being a TA for a professor that my future boss was a TA for a decade earlier. So you never know what sequence of life choices is going to land you in a job down the road.
Thank you very much. And Frank, if you want to answer that question as well.
I would say it's the rigor of the curriculum. I still have nightmares sometimes, not all the time, but occasionally, oh, the exam is right now. I didn't wake up, the alarm didn't go off, I still have dreams like that time to time. But since, I graduated pretty recently with Kennedy, I specifically remember, so I was interviewing with a company you may have heard of, which is Schlumberger. It's a big engineering company that builds a lot of electronics for oil and gas. And during the interview, they just slapped a schematic in my face, and they were like, "What is this? What does it do?" And then, I was like, I have no idea. But then they pointed to each part, this op amp, this loop, what does it do? And, I was able to answer those questions, I think, because some of the classes have been so rigorous and, I think my foundation was very strong. I mean, at this point, I forgot some of it, but back then, I think as a senior at the time, it was so beaten into you, for better or worse, that I was able to answer the question, and that impressed them, and I got an offer from Schlumberger. And the other thing I think is, kind of what we're trying to promote here with HKN, which is to socialize with your fellow, students and building kind of your network. I still stay in touch with a good number of friends from tech. Kennedy's one of them. And, Georgia Tech, especially in engineering, we have such a strong network of alumni. The person that interviewed me, one of the people that interviewed me at MathWorks was from Georgia Tech. So that, that came to my surprise, but that's the other part of it, which is not just the curriculum and the foundation, but also the alumni network.
Absolutely. And now it seems like we're getting some questions from the attendants. So first question from Dr. Gilward. After you had been working for a year or two, what do you feel was the biggest deficiency in your college education? What do you wish you had gotten that you didn't get? So any of you can go ahead with that question.
I can.
Jump in.
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay, I'll let Ryan go first. Yeah.
I've been fortunate in that a lot of the work that I've done actually relates pretty directly to my degree. I did a bachelor's in computer engineering and a master's in EE. And even though I never really had any formal classes in the area that I'm in, a lot of the project work and that sort of thing ties in really strongly to the computer engineering side, flip-flops and gates and stuff like that. So I've been fortunate there. Let's see. I guess I wish I had taken had the foresight to taken some more DSP classes or radar related classes, because I basically just learned all that stuff on the fly once I started working for GTRI. I did the computer vision and FPGA parts that I already knew, and as that work went on, they kind of trained me as I went on the radar part, so I would stay useful after that project. So yeah, I guess I wish I'd known enough back then to take a few different classes that would have related to where I'm at now.
I think from my experience, I think our curriculum, I would say, could be somewhat more flexible. Uh, for example, in the beginning, we had a lot of foundational classes, in different aspects of EE. But for example, if you didn't want to do DSP stuff, you do 2026, and you basically, for the most part, never touch it again. Um, Undergrad, I'm speaking about. It's not really until your last 2 years does the curriculum start opening up for you to, for example, if you're interested in computer vision or some sort of artificial intelligence with like a double E twist to it, maybe hardware optimized AI, stuff like that. It doesn't really open up until later in your curriculum and Georgia Tech career as an undergrad, at least. Um, and I think some of this stuff, if you discover your passion early, I think really some of the other stuff may not be necessary, because it also may not be what you ultimately end up doing or have a passion for. EE is a very big field. So I think there should be an option to perhaps open up the curriculum earlier to students and give more flexibility. But that
Yeah, I
would be my
agree.
comment and feedback.
I agree and disagree, because for someone like Frank that knew what he wanted to do, that would be a good idea. But for someone like me, I had no idea. So getting exposure to all different types of EE stuff was really helpful to me. still didn't know what I wanted to do, but it was good for me to realize what I didn't want to do. So yeah, that's it. With Ryan, in hindsight, I wish if I could go back, I would have taken different classes. But, back then I just took what I thought was best for me at the time. So that's it for me.
Yeah, yeah. I think the most important thing is to have a plan and work the plan, but be open to opportunities as they come along. You can't predict the future that well. All you can do is choose a field or an area of study that you think you'll be happy with and pursue that. And as you're doing that, you never know what opportunity will come along where you might be able to transition into something a little different that you discover you like even more.
I mean, my comment regarding that, I'm adding on to what Ryan is saying, is a lot of the things after you leave school, you learn on the job. Even if you're to work in a field that is directly related to your education or directly related to your country, you still learn a lot of stuff on the job. But I'm not actively interviewing, so there's no conflict of interest here. But I have been on the other side for a good year and a half. I do interview before on behalf of MathWorks to admit candidates into the EDG program, and there are specific things we look for in technical interviews. And it's more so about your capacity to learn, your curiosity, and your expertise. Your expertise does matter. Even if the expertise is not, what we're specifically going to have you do after we take you, but we like to know, how much of an expert you are, because that also reflects on your capacity to learn. So that's also kind of why I've made that comment. I agree. If you are still trying to explore what you're trying to do, what you like, what you don't like, I think the curriculum is there for that. But I also think we can offer those who have found the passion to kind of open up the curriculum for that. And I think there's a little bit of a gap between that currently. That would be my comment and feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. The important thing from a company's perspective, I think, is that they know you're trainable and they can teach you the important parts that are important to them. And if you're on an interview, don't try to fake them out with an answer you don't know the answer to, or a question you don't know the answer to. Now that I've been on the other side of the interviews too, it's so easy to see when somebody is just kind of trying to pull something out of the air and make it sound like they know about something that they don't have a clue in. It's better to just say, yeah, that's not really my area, but this is how I would go about, trying to get better or more proficient in that area, that sort of thing.
I mean, true story. I have a very funny personal interview story with MathWorks, just to add on to Ryan's point. So they had me take these integrals. They were like, this is a plane, speed, blah, 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 take the integral, fuel consumption, whatever. Some math question, right? So they asked me that. I answered it. I got it right. And this was the in-person whiteboard interview. And then in the end, they asked me a very simple question. They were like, here's a 2x2 matrix, take the determinant. And just off the top of my head, I was like, you flip it, you take the negative, you cross the products and subtract, I was like, I just cannot remember the exact formula. Just at that moment, I just cannot remember the exact formula. I was very frank about it, I was like, I answered your hard questions, but this one I just cannot answer. And, they were like, okay, that's fine. So I thought, they would not ask me this again. So when I went home, I didn't bother studying this or something like that. So it turns out another round of whiteboard interview, they asked the same thing at the end. So I told them, you asked me this exact thing in a previous interview. I couldn't answer it, and I'm sorry to say I did not study it, and I couldn't answer this now. But, it ended up being fine. I mean, I'm friends with the guy who interviewed me now, and, it was a funny story, but, the honesty is really appreciated by the interviewers.
Yeah, it's good to be able to recognize what you don't know as well as what you do know, so that the company knows that you'll be willing to ask questions and find out more, not try to bluff your way through.
Yeah, and one thing, because when I was at Georgia Tech, I was a perfectionist. Like, I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted to get an A on everything. And then when I went to interview, they were asking me these really hard questions that I just didn't know how to answer. And I was like, oh my gosh, I did terribly at this interview. There's no way I'm going to get the job. I feel stupid. Turns out I got the job anyways. So it's just a big difference between the professional world and education. You're not going to know everything, but they want to know that you're willing to try and see your thought process. So that was a big shock to me because I was just so used to knowing everything.
Great conversation about that question. Let's move on to another question that I've seen a couple people ask is a more specific question. What classes at Georgia Tech helped you or have helped you in your job so far? Kennedy, if you want to go ahead, you think of any classes?
Um, Honestly, I would say all of them because it just taught me how to learn, anything, learn a bunch of different kind of things. At the time, I didn't know I was going to be doing hardware design, so I didn't really take specialized classes in that. So obviously, 3043 was kind of my only basis on that. So, shows to prove that you can learn whatever. That was the only class I've really taken on hardware, and now that's what I do for a living.
For me, I think one of the more memorable ones was 2036, the C++ and embed class. Um, I think that specifically helped me out for the Schlumberger job interview. And right now, I deal with a lot of C++, and that just the fact that that class gave exposure to a lot of C++ as you're playing around with the embed, I think that class was helpful. Um, I see a question about my CS minor. I think virtually all of the latter half of my CS minor uh, has helped me greatly in my current job. Um, I think if you're taking a CS minor, earlier in the minor, there's a lot of repetition. Like I was forced to take CS 2110, I think that's the course. It's a huge overlap with 2036 and 2031, I think, and it was to me that was a waste of time. They weren't flexible with me skipping it, but I aced that class because basically it was just those two classes. So it would be easy for any of you if you have taken those already to take this CS class. But um, I definitely think the CS classes have helped me a lot.
Ryan, if you can think of any classes.
I feel a little bit like an imposter because I only did the PhD at Tech, and so that meant I only really took, I think, 8 or 9 classes, and then most of the rest were research credits, doing my own thing. You all are talking about specific course numbers, and I couldn't tell you about any of the course numbers in the catalog and what class those mapped to. There was I took was it a special topics class with Linda Wills, who was my PhD advisor, and that one was really good just in terms of kind of setting the stage for some of the research, and it was just a really interesting class. She taught really well on embedded video surveillance, really project oriented and fun to play around with things. It was a good opportunity to just try things out. There weren't necessarily a lot of right or wrong answers. It was just finding out what would work. I remember a class on partial differential equations for image processing that I think Dr. Yezi taught. Really mathy, but it was a really fun class to take just because he was so passionate about it. I don't know if anybody has taken him here before, but he's just really enthusiastic and interesting to hear talk about what would otherwise be really dry material, and cool to see some of the applications of it. Yeah, those are the only ones I can think of offhand that come to mind. I had one on on digital system testing that was interesting. Um, I can't remember anything else about who taught it or what the course number was.
No problem. Thank you
I
very much.
I also just want to caveat real quick. I work for a software company, so obviously, I'm leaning towards the software classes. But if you're uh, working for, a more hardware-oriented company, I think Kennedy worked for Bose for a little bit. Like your mileage will vary with the classes. I don't want you to start running towards CS classes. I just want to caveat, I work for a software company, so that's why the CS classes were so helpful.
So we'll move on to another question. This question is, how was your experience after you took up your first job? He mentions that he's been having some imposter syndrome thoughts lately, just paraphrasing, after managing to survive some classes, but it doesn't necessarily make him remember all the techniques and skills that you learn in the class, and doesn't necessarily mean that effort at real world problems could become as successful as in a controlled class environment. So I guess this question is more about how your in-class learning translated to your first job and how your experience has been learning on the fly. You guys all touched on this, but maybe Kennedy, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, so the imposter syndrome is definitely real. Going in out of college, you're like, I graced the surface of this. I know how to learn. I learned the theory behind it, but I don't know it as in depth as the rest of the people in the group do. But that's okay. They understand that you're a fresh grad, that you're not going to know everything, but they know you graduated from Georgia Tech. You know how to learn, you have a good work ethic, and that's all that matters. So even if you feel like, I don't know what I'm doing here, am I going to be able to do this? You can do it. They understand where you're at. They've all been there. So just don't doubt yourself. You can definitely learn, and that's all that matters is that you have the work ethic.
Yeah, again, I think it's just important that just by going to tech, you've proven that you're trainable, and that's really what they care about. Um, it's okay if you don't know right out of the gate how to do all the things that you're being asked to do, as long as you recognize when you hit a problem that you can't figure out yourself, and you go to the right people to try to get help, to get clarification. Because what they don't want you to do is go off in a corner and burn 2 weeks tinkering with a problem that they could have explained to you in 5 minutes.
I think that's a big point made by Ryan, like understanding when to ask for help. For example, uh, from my job interviewing experience, both as the interviewer and the student interviewee fairly recently, most of these technical interviews will allow you to ask for tips. Okay, sometimes the interviewer is not so nice, like me. Well, I mean, I'm nice, but some people are not so nice. They won't tell you you can ask for tips. They'll just let you. They'll just watch you struggle. But you can be proactive and you can ask for tips. And you can say, you know, here's what I understand. Now I'm not so clear about this part. Would it be possible for me to have a tip? You can ask that question, and it's actually meaningful. It's more than just oh, I have to give you a tip. It's not like that. Um, to the interviewer as well, that's an indication to us that you're being honest, you're not bluffing, and you're asking for help. And depending on how nice the interviewer is, they'll give you a genuine tip. Um, I think you know trying to survive the classes. I mean, there's there's an aspect of stoicism in that. I think we can all, completely honestly speaking, not everything you learn in class is going to be applicable to your job or later on in your life. I mean, that's just the reality that we have to accept. But the same kind of reality happens on the job as well. I mean, sometimes, like Ryan was saying, they don't want you wasting 2 weeks. Sometimes your whole prototype can be canceled. Sometimes your whole product can be reworked by upper management. So, but you just have to deal with it to a certain extent. And part of that stoicism, employers also do look for that. But in terms of remembering specific skills or techniques, that also goes to my point that if you have a passion, I think you should, especially a technical passion, you should go pursue that. You should try to become more of an expert. And at Tech, when I was at Tech, I didn't take advantage of these opportunities earlier. I only started taking advantage when I was maybe a junior. There are lots of labs and URA opportunities for you to even paid. Like I had a paid URA opportunity that I didn't take from ECE. It was actually an aerospace lab. In the basement, they have a very cool, vacuum floating spacecraft. I think they're still looking for URAs, so you can follow up with me after this if you want to work for them. But there are plenty of labs. If you're passionate about something, I'm sure there's a lab at Georgia Tech or at GTRI, for that. And you should try to pursue that, explore it, become an expert. And if you tell me as a job interviewer, someone interviewing you that, that's a huge deal and a huge plus for you.
For me, the biggest difference is, when you're in school, you have your professors. I highly recommend taking advantage of that, picking their brains, going to office hours, because you have someone there that wants to explain it to you, that wants to teach you. And you still have that in your career. There's people that want to help you, but there is the right balance in your career. If you're really stuck on something, then you can ask for help, ask your colleagues, bounce ideas off of them, but there is the balance where you still have to figure it out yourself, which you still have to do at Georgia Tech, but you have, help from your professors. You can go ask for their help. So it's definitely finding the right balance and showing that you can go solve problems by yourself, but knowing when to ask for help.
Great.
And
Graded.
I have one more
Amen.
comment regarding that, which is first, is there's another question, I think from Dr. Gaylord about biggest shock for first job. I think, tech does a lot of great things to prepare for life, even high school and stuff before that, right? But nobody teaches you how to do taxes. Nobody teaches you how to do accounting. I think when you leave school, I really think for anybody, no matter what you want to do, you should start studying up on personal finance. Should I save my money? Should I invest my money? Should I have an emergency fund? Do I have student loans? I do. You know, how do I plan to pay back those student loans? I think, and then of course, taxes is a huge thing. Even when you have your first internship, you get thrown all these papers from HR, these COBRA forms, blah 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 forms. You might not think much when you're an intern, but even like if there's a problem with the form, it'll come back and bite you. And true story here, I made some money as a URA, right, for the aerospace lab. And there was a small issue with my tax filing because I'm originally from Boston as well. So I have to file in Georgia, file taxes in Georgia and file taxes in Massachusetts. There was a small issue because I used TurboTax. I didn't use an accountant. There was no human checking it. Okay, so it turns out I did not report my URA income in Massachusetts. And just a few months ago, they were like, there's a problem with your 2017 tax return. And here's the interest plus fines. So I owed them maybe like 30-40 bucks in tax, Massachusetts. Okay, but after interest and fines, it was like $100. I'm a little shocked they would chase after me over $100. How much money does it take for them to audit me? But I got audited, and that happened. And you have to fix it. If you don't pay taxes, you can go to jail if it's severe enough. So I think don't spend too much time on it, but definitely don't neglect it. I think personal, especially after you leave school, personal finance. How do I manage my financial independence? I had some help from family and parents when I was in school as well, but when you get a job, you feel you're a big adult now, So I think a lot of personal finance you should consider right before and right after you leave school.
Add on
Yeah.
to that, I know a lot of the people I graduated with at Georgia Tech, you get a job after school, you're like, oh yeah, I got money. A bunch of people just went and spent all their money and just was not cautious at all about their spending. So I would advise you about that. You still have to have savings. You still have to have money to survive. So don't be, I have money now. I can spend it on whatever I want. So that goes along with Frank's. Personal finance is definitely a big shock after you graduate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think engineers are a little bit better about it than some other disciplines, but once you get your first job, don't just go out and buy a new car. I'm 38 years old. I graduated with my first degree like 16, 17 years ago, and I still drive a 25-year-old car. I drive a 1994 Bonneville um, that's got 250,000 miles on it, um, and it doesn't cost a whole lot to operate. There's zero depreciation on that one. If I wait long enough, just a couple more years, it'll kind of slide into the antique category. Maybe it'll start going up in value. Um, it's way better to take that kind of money and put it down on a house. Something that'll appreciate over time. Once you get your house paid for, you can sock away money so fast if you don't have a mortgage, and you can live on basically nothing because you've just got basic bills and food and that sort of thing. Get the mortgage and the student loans out of the way, and you can accumulate some money in a hurry.
Great advice. So we had some questions before the panel started that some people submitted. One question was, when looking for jobs after graduation, did you have any location constraints? And if so, how did you deal with them? I'm not sure if this applies to any of you three, but if it does, go ahead.
I'll go because I've lived a few places since I graduated. I just knew that I wanted a job that would be flexible. So like right out of college, I wanted to be able to live in different places. So that's why I kind of went into consulting, even though my job wasn't really consulting. So I moved to Boston, I moved to Denver, all within the same job. So that's kind of what I was looking for, a job that would let me live wherever. And now that I'm a little bit older, I, kind of want to get settled down somewhere by a house. So now, um, looked for a job in Atlanta and then just accepted a job in Atlanta so I can be back home after I've kind of explored the other options and lived life a little bit, stepped outside my comfort zone, which I highly recommend for anybody out of college. Step out of your comfort zone, move somewhere, experience different things. I really enjoyed moving somewhere where I didn't know anyone, and kind of having to survive on my own. So I highly recommend that, for anybody graduating.
I think, yeah, if you're younger and you don't have kids and you don't have any special reason to make you inflexible about the location, I think nowadays, I agree with stepping outside your comfort zone. And also, I'm not sure about the job market because of COVID and all this stuff. So I think you may have to be more flexible regarding the employer wants you to relocate and stuff like that. I mean, at the same time, because of COVID, people are working from home. And I know for MathWorks, we had a strictly no work from home policy for several reasons. One including that we do some sensitive defense stuff. Um, but because of COVID, some new hires, they're in Arizona, they're in New Mexico. We're not forcing them to come to Boston, at least for now. So maybe COVID has opened up some doors in this regard, but also I think in general, you know, step outside your comfort zone. You might think, oh, Schlumberger, I'm going middle of nowhere, Texas, but maybe you'll like it there. So
Yeah,
it's cheaper than Boston. If we're talking personal finance, it's cheaper than Boston.
And Denver.
yeah. I think especially early on, it's important to be willing to move to where the work is. Get a couple years experience under your belt, and then you can pick your destination after that. You can live pretty much anywhere for a couple years and get that early experience. My wife and I are both from Missouri, and we weren't crazy about the idea of going too far from home just because all of our families are still there. But Atlanta's like an 8-9 hour drive back there. That's doable in a day. So we're not visiting people every weekend, but we can go back for big events and for a while over the summer. You can always visit a while. So yeah, it's good. It's important to get your foot in the door and get that early experience wherever you have to go to get it. I know a few people that limited themselves a little too much and just really didn't want to leave home, and they could have gotten into some really cool jobs if they were willing to travel 500 to 1,000 miles for a little while and then kind of write their own ticket, but they didn't want to do that.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people that kind of stayed in their comfort zone after graduating, and then now that we're 27, they're like, oh my gosh, I regret this. Like, you did it when you were young. I wish I would have done it then. Like, now it's a little bit more sticky. So move where you want to move. If you really want to live in, I don't know, Idaho, try to look for a job there. You can move somewhere for the job, or you can look for a job wherever you want to go. This is the time to do what you want to do, and then you can always move back. You can always move back to your comfort zone later once you've experienced what else is out there.
Good advice, good advice. Another question we've touched on this a bit with Frank and Ryan, but what would you look for if you were, or if you have been, as Frank is, in the position to hire new graduates from Georgia Tech? What would you look for in a graduate from Georgia Tech for a job? Frank, if you want to talk more on that since you've been in that position.
I mean, I think the key thing for a new graduate is communication skills. I think communication skills have to be very strong. And I'm not talking like just superficially communication skills, but also technical communication skills. You can, know all the technical stuff, as anybody, but if you cannot communicate that clearly to your colleagues or even management, that would not be very worthwhile for an employer. I also think in terms of different kinds of companies look for different things. For example, MathWorks is a larger company, so they would be looking for a different set of things. For example, they would be looking for someone who doesn't necessarily have the expertise but is willing to learn. That's very common for larger groups, larger companies, larger organizations. But for a startup, because I do co-run a startup on the side with some of my high school friends, totally unrelated to what I do for my day job. For a startup, the requirements might be different. For example, we might compensate you differently, and we might expect you to be flexible in accepting that. Like, I might give you less money, but I will give you some shares, some ownership in the startup. Or I cannot hire you as an employee, I have to hire you as a contractor. So instead of a W-2, a 1099. Uh, you can read up on that later, or I can explain to you offline what the difference between that is. Um, and the other thing for startup is some startups, I don't care if you learn or not. You need to come in and immediately start doing stuff. For example, for my startup, we're a technology travel company, and you know, we need React Native developers. And we don't want you to learn React Native. When you come in, you need to start coding in React Native right away. I want an Android build of my app, in 2 weeks. But for a larger company, you have training, orientation, HR paperwork, 401k match. How much do you want to put in this, open enrollment for health insurance, blah, blah, blah. Startups, it's a very, very different animal. So it also depends on, what kind of career path you're looking to pursue.
I would say, as a new grad, you're not going to be an expert in most things that you're trying to look for jobs in. I would say the number one thing is excitement. If you go in and you're just like, blah, 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 this is what I know, da, 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 they're not going to get excited for you. So if you go in and you're like, I don't know anything, I don't know a whole lot, but I'm super excited to learn, I'm super excited to work here and learn from you. That's kind of how I've gotten both my jobs after graduation. It's just being super excited, making them know that you're excited to work with them, to learn from them, and work on whatever product they're developing.
Yeah, enthusiasm is definitely a big part of it, and kind of like Frank was saying, it depends a lot on the culture of the place where you're interviewing. If it's a place, and just what the company's needs are at the time. Like at GTRI, sometimes we're hiring people because we need a specific skill set, and so we need somebody who already has a particular coding background or signal processing or something, so they can start applying that knowledge or those skills right away, and they can learn the other parts that they're not as familiar with as they go, but they can start adding value immediately. And other times we just need people who are trainable and who are enthusiastic about getting on board, and we can get spun up on all the different things they need to know. But like Frank said, also communication is key across the board, no matter what kind of position it is. Being able to just speak and make eye contact and that sort of thing, and also in written communication. I've seen a lot of emails and memos and things that were written as though they were texts on a phone, and sometimes it's hard to get past that in an organization. So yeah, all those are good points.
Fantastic. Good points. We're reaching the final 10 minutes of the time we have allotted for the panel. So if anyone has any other questions, please put them in the Blue Jeans chat and hopefully we'll get to them. But while we don't have any right now, I have another question. How did your involvement in HKN help you in your school and career life? Ryan, if you want to go ahead, as you've stayed involved in HKN.
Sure. Yeah, I guess Eta Kappa Nu had a pretty significant impact in the path I took because my master's advisor in Rolla was also my senior advisor and was also the HKN advisor that I got to know really well through Eta Kappa Nu. And because I knew him from that early HKN involvement, that kind of led to me working with him more on thesis projects and that sort of thing. And that pretty directly guided me to where I'm at now. And he's the one who also kind of roped me into to staying involved in HKN this long after I graduated on the board of governors and on a few different committees and things. It's had a big impact in the people that I've stayed connected to, and just being able to help bounce ideas off of for publications. It's hard to predict where those kinds of connections will come back to be beneficial.
Kennedy, if you want to add anything.
I think Ryan covered it. My biggest thing is the people that I met, the connections. A big help was talking to the graduate students in HKN. They kind of helped me understand if I wanted to go get a graduate degree, helped me understood because in undergrad you learn a lot of theory. You don't learn how to implement that necessarily. So when you talk to the graduate students, you kind of get a better feel on what they're doing, what they're implementing, and it helped me figure out more what I wanted to do. And good connections, good friends that I'm still in touch with.
I,
And
I,
Frank, do you have anything to add?
I think Kennedy and Ryan covered a good chunk of it. I mean, a good majority of my friends that I stay in touch with from tech are from HKN. That's number one. Number two, I would encourage any member that's here, I mean, to be involved as an HKN officer. I think the fact that you are doing extra things to help HKN, run as an organization, it builds leadership, it builds communication skills, social skills, and maybe you would care about this a lot too. For your resume, it's also good, and you can discuss concretely, how you've contributed to this organization through your communication skills, leadership skills, teamwork, and all of that.
Great. And as we're wrapping up the panel soon, I have also put a link for our HKN LinkedIn group. As has been mentioned, networking is a big part of HKN. So as we engage with more alumni, LinkedIn's a great way to connect with them, ask any questions you might have through that as well after this panel wraps up. But it seems like we have another question. What is worthwhile to negotiate for when starting a new job? For example, salary, parking space, etc. If anyone has anything to say about that.
It depends a lot on where you're going to, where you're interviewing. If it's a state or government organization, like GTRI or something like that, there's not necessarily a lot of negotiation to be done. There might be pretty fixed brackets where your offer is going to be pulled from, and there's not a whole lot to be done about it. Just an example, I wouldn't worry much about parking space. Just walk it. If you're going to ask for something and try to get some leverage, put it towards salary or vacation days or something like that. Sometimes vacation and sick time is something that you can negotiate depending on the company. Especially if you've got some experience, you can try to get them to recognize that with maybe a higher starting vacation level, that sort of thing.
I would say as a new grad, it's very difficult to negotiate salary because like Brian said, they usually have, a set income for new grads. So, negotiation's definitely easier once you get some experience under your belt, you've worked for a few years, switching to another company, definitely negotiate. You can, when you switch jobs, you can definitely jump up pay quite a bit, but as a new grad, it's definitely not an easy thing to do, negotiating salary. I mean, parking spaces, I don't know, because I worked from home for 3 years, so my parking space is out front of my house, so.
I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, negotiating salary is very difficult. It's just a very difficult thing to do. And like Ryan and Kennedy are saying, if you're a new grad, you basically don't have much leverage. I wouldn't bother about the parking space. It might even sound petty if you bring it up. So I think in terms of negotiating salary, the key thing before you even negotiate, I think, is to understand who you're negotiating with. And I mean, this goes with any negotiation. I mean, for example, if you were to negotiate with MathWorks, you're not negotiating with your future boss. You're not negotiating with your future manager. You're negotiating with the HR person, the HR hiring manager, whatever HR person that you'll never see again. It's like the college admissions person. You'll never see that person again once you actually start working for MathWorks. You can negotiate all you want, but the reality for them is, even similar to a government organization, they have a certain amount of salary allotted in the corporate account of this department for this position, for this role. The real wiggle room, if there is any, is very small. So I don't think you'll be able to negotiate much in that sense. Now, the other thing is for a startup, startups are cash hungry. Like my startup, we can always use more money, we can always use more investment. So we're not incentivized to pay you more if we can get away with it. Now, the only thing that would incentivize to pay you more is to keep you. And this is with any company as well. So maybe when you just started, you don't have much negotiating power. But let's say you work 2, 3 years, you do a great job, everyone's happy with you, likes you, and you say, okay, maybe for my career or where I want to be in 10 years, I want to be making a little more money. Okay. The unfortunate reality is that's a very difficult conversation to have, but maybe you should start looking for a new job that pays more. And if you find it, you can actually go back to your manager and say, hey, I have an offer from XYZ and they're paying me this much. However, I really like the culture. I really like all the work we've accomplished here. I love the team. Is it possible to match? Or that's when you have the real leverage. And that's when you're talking to your boss, because for the most part, corporate drama aside, for the most part, your boss doesn't really care how much money you make because he's not actually writing your paycheck. So, but if your boss likes you and wants to keep you, that gives you a lot of leverage when you negotiate.
Yeah,
And I mean,
that's exactly right. You got to be careful with that a little bit, because if you go through the trouble of getting an offer somewhere else, and the place you're working doesn't reciprocate the way you'd like, you still have to kind of be willing to cut the cord and take the other offer. Probably you can only play that card so many times before they're not going to play along with you.
Yes, that card cannot be overplayed. I mean, with any negotiation, you cannot overplay your cards, but that is like game theory. That is the kind of game theory that gives you like a true, hard, concrete negotiating leverage. But you do have some leverage. You don't have zero leverage. In my personal experience, I had 3 opportunities: Siemens, Schlumberger, and MathWorks. And I pulled this card on Schlumberger. I said, I really like what you guys are doing. Your technologies in terms. If you don't understand Schlumberger, they make these drill bits for natural gas and oil, but the drill bits themselves are like rocket ships in terms of the sensors inside, and that it has to survive the harsh conditions of it's very cool what they do, right? So I explained this to them, and I was like, but I also have this offer from MathWorks, blah 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 blah. I was wondering if I could have my offer adjusted, and usually that comes not in the form of a raised salary, but that comes in the form of a sign-on bonus. They might be happy to up your relocation bonus. They might be happy to up your sign-on bonus. And I think for new grads with less experience, that is definitely something to consider when you're negotiating.
Yes, it's definitely harder to negotiate right after graduation, because you haven't really had an opportunity to demonstrate or prove your value yet. All you have is your academic record and maybe some co-ops and internships. You can, the IEEE does a salary survey every year, and so it's not a bad idea to get access to that and just do some basic searches on the kind of job you'd expect to do, and maybe the geographic area where the job would be, just to make sure that their offer is in line with what you'd expect and what other IEEE members have reported. But it's definitely easier to exercise that kind of leverage when you move from one job to another, because you've got some past experience, work experience, where you can plug in some numbers and demonstrate the value that you've added to a company or the kind of impact you've had in a particular role. Those are the kinds of things that make it easier to negotiate later on.
Great.
To add on to Ryan, make sure they're not lowballing you. Like, definitely check what related, positions in the same area, etc., are making. And I mean, I learned this trick from a friend at MathWorks. So Glassdoor can be inaccurate. Maybe some of you are familiar with Glassdoor already. So I mean, when I was negotiating with MathWorks, I named the number on Glassdoor at the time. The number's different now, but at the time I named the number when they asked me what you expect. It was 10 grand less. The HR person literally told me that's 10 grand less than what we usually give when we give an offer. I was like, oh no. So if you want something super accurate, a lot of companies, they hire immigrants, and immigrants, they have to go through this H-1B visa, especially if you're an international student. And when they apply for the H-1B visa, the salary is public. You don't know the name, but for the application number, blah, 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 it's public. So you can look up what's called the H-1B salary database, and you can pretty much get the exact numbers. So that's a tip.
Great tip. So it looks like we have run out of time for the panel tonight. I want to thank all three panelists, Frank, Kennedy, and Ryan, for their time. Thank everyone who was attending for all your great questions as well. Hope everyone has a good rest of your week, and we'll look forward to any future alumni panels. You might see these former HKN members there as well. But that is all for the panel. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your
Thank you,
week.
Ryan, Kennedy, and Frank. Good job.
Thank you, Dr. Gaylord.
Thank you, Dr. Gaylord.
It's good to see you again.
Likewise, done a great service to our Eta Kappa Nu chapter. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if
Thanks,
any of you guys have any questions, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. It's just Kennedy Taylor.
Stay safe.
Bye, Dr. Gaylord. Bye, everyone.